Welcome to another edition of Dirshu Daf HaYomi Behalacha. Today we're going to be starting the second Siman, Din Levishas Begadim. There's 6 Sifim. We're going to see the first 5 today. The three questions that are going to be addressed in Dirshu are the following. How should a person conduct himself when he is in private? Second question, what is the proper way to get dressed? And the third question, can one remove 2 articles of clothing at the same time? These questions will be answered in the next 5 sifim. Again, sif aleph. Lo yulbash chaluko miyushav. Person literally should not be taking off his shirt while sitting. El yika chaluko v'yachnes bo rosho. You should hold on to the portion of the garment, and you should take out your head of zeraisav, as well as its arms, be'onu shaychev, while you're lying down. V'nimsa kishayokum shehu mechusa. This way, when you get up, you're already covered up. So in other words, when a person puts on his shirt, he shouldn't do it, he's just not wearing a shirt, but rather he should do it while he's still lying down under the covers. So this obviously has to do with the importance of remaining sneas, even in one's home. It says the Mishnah Berurah, De'oz behechrech yisgal gufo, because if you're sitting down, part of your body will be exposed. We have to be modest in front of Hashem. Even if it's at night, even if it's in the innermost room, and this was a question that was asked 7 years ago, must one be careful with personal modesty while dressing? And the answer is always, even in darkness in an innermost room, which is, of course, the words of the Mishnah Berurah, which we just saw. Hashem fills up the whole world. Dark is the same thing as light. Hashem can still see you. We have to be careful. We don't reveal our body, even a small amount. Things that are generally covered remain covered. A person is allowed to reveal his arm ad kubadai. On this, it's on the bottom, it says maf rake, like until like the elbows. But savaro ad hechaze, and your neck until basically the bone. So if a person has all their buttons open, exposing their chest, that's obviously not sneas. Al kain ha'an pilois yiril lavashim olapashtam gam kain tachas hasadin. So again, when a person is putting on clothing or taking them off, you should be underneath a sheet. Sholigalos raglav. Even when it comes to your legs, we don't want to reveal your feet. Even in the summer, people don't go around barefoot. So according to this, again, even taking off, let's say, your socks, exposing your legs is something which is, if it's typically not done, then you have to be careful there. Interesting. When it comes to a bathhouse, he says that is not the din. It's not necessary for a person to have to worry about that. So too if you're by a river. You should take off your garments and put them on right next to the river as much as possible. We don't want you to be revealed for no reason. Fine. If you look, actually, we're going to stop in the middle of this Mishnah Berurah. We'll go right back to it. In the Bi'urim Umusafim, again, he discusses how should one conduct himself while in private. So again, addressing this question, he says, again, when it comes to the Beis HaMerchatz, quoting the Igros Moshe, Shebeis HaMerchatz eno machmas kavod hashchina. There's no issue of kavod hashchina in the Beis HaMerchatz. That's what Moshe says. Furthermore, he says, Asher al kain lo shaykh bo din snias machmas kavod hashchina. There's no issue. Skipping a line, he quotes again, Negos Moshe, Lamoid Oram Ba'ambatya, standing naked, literally in a bathhouse, with Tzarech Avishas Begadim, Afal Pishin, Oisa Kach, Osa Kain Lot Tzarech Arachitza, Shekiman Shoisa Kain, Be'ezah Shu Sayrech Vambatya, Hu Makam Hasoy L'Shois, By Oipen Zeh, In Hadavar, Paigaman Hagas HaRegel Sneeze. Again, if a person's in a bathhouse, so the dinim of sneeze are not as strict. A person doesn't stay in a bathroom for a long period of time. A person has to be more careful in a bathroom than in a base hamerchatz. Okay, let's just finish this Mishnah Berurah, then we'll see what it says in the Dirshu questions. You don't even have to cover your erva. This Gemara discusses whether you should or you shouldn't. Going in, going there, is it like your kaifer briso shalavim? The Gemara talks about v'od ela shemachase nir ki'ilu boish b'davar. That's what it says here actually. Uki'ilu kaifer briso shalavim. So maybe it's not a good thing to cover. Ach b'liyasai, that's going down, but coming up, shepanav klapi everyone's facing you. You're facing everyone. Yisha, so yishcha o yasim yadu keneged ervasal chasaisa. So maybe you should bend down, or again do something to show a little bit of modesty. Novashal yigaba. We don't touch the erva, as we'll see at the end of Siman Gimel. It says in Shas, choluk shel tamid chacham kol she'ein b'sar niras metachtav. A tamid chacham's shirt is that you can't see that which is underneath. But in the Inishar and Bezem Yishum Shahoyachan Hakoyel Babati Shokoyim Ben Habasar Niras. Okay. Alright, let's continue with this sif. Kishiyokum, when you get up, Ratzalemish Kishiyokum, the Yitzim Matachas Kisu Sedino, when you leave this sheet that's covering you, Shaimunach Sham Arum Kishaposh Chalukah, when you took off your shirt. Ya'ata Takef Machuse, you're covered already. You put on your shirt underneath this blanket, lying down. Ki'ipol chaluku al kol gufa ma'atzmo. Okay. He concludes and says, Hamaniach malbusha mirashaisav mishacheach limudai. A person who leaves his garments from his head, it can cause him to forget his learning. The Efshaim maniach davar acher hamasik bein roishel begadav bein kpeda. If there's something separating between the two, it's not an issue. He also says that if you remove two garments at the same time, it's also kashal shicha. This is actually another question over here. It says, in what case does leaving one's clothing under one's head, not just occasionally, cause one to forget? So the answer is, if there's something between one's head and the clothing, there may be no problem. Otherwise, if a person leaves their clothing underneath their head, then it's a problem that's kashal shicha. Hakar ksav shal gav hakever ostakel bifnei hameis mishacheach limuda. Again, he quotes other things that cause a person to forget their learning. Okay, so that addresses the first question. So let's just see what he writes. A person must always conduct himself besnius in a modest fashion, even within the privacy of his own home. Since one is always in the presence of Hashem, a person should be careful not to unnecessarily reveal parts of the body which are normally covered. A body part is considered normally covered if a person would cover that area in front of a guest in his home. In situations where a certain state of undress is accepted, following these norms is not a lack of sneas. One should attempt to minimize his exposure, however, revealing only what is necessary. Okay, let's continue now with Sif Beis. Al Yomer, a person shouldn't say, Hini b'chadri chadarim mi ro'eni, I'm in the innermost room, who's going to see me? Ki kodesh baruch hu melech ha'aretz kavayda. So you say Hashem fills the entire world, and therefore you should be careful even b'chadri chadarim. Sif Gimel, Yadaktek b'chaluko, you have to be careful with your shirt. Lulav sho kedarko, to wear it properly. Shol yehafleich hapanimi l'chutz, that you shouldn't wear it inside out. So apparently that is an issue. Okay, let's finish up Dalet and Hey. When it comes to putting on your shoes, you put on the right first, but don't tie it. And then put on the left shoe and then tie it. And then you tie the right. And he quotes the Ramah. If let's say you have slip-on shoes, and you just put the right one on first. And then sif hey, when you take them off, you take the left one off first. So you put on the right, put on the left, tie the left, then tie the right. When you take them off, you do the opposite. You take off the left shoe first. Okay, so fine. So this is within the framework of the proper way of getting dressed. So let's look at Sif Gimel, Bachaluka in Mishnah Berurah. Alpha Bishu Tachas Kol Hamalbushim. Even if it's underneath other garments, V'koshikin B'shar Begadim. Again, a person shouldn't wear their clothes inside out. Fine. And it says because it's gonna be any habrios. It's like, which is like repulsive that you're not careful. You have to put it on properly. When it comes to davening, everyone has to wear the shirt properly. You have to wear your clothes properly and show proper coverage to Hashem. Again, it says you put on the right and then the left. That again, typically we do the right and then the left. Then he quotes the Rambam, Malbush Talmud Chacham Yehiba Malbush Noav Naki. Talmud Chacham's clothes should be clean. They're also Shimatza B'Begad of Ketzem. He shouldn't have any stains on his garments. V'yilbash lo malbush sorim shahakol mastachel behem lo malbush aniyim shehu mavazas al. You can't wear clothes which will set him out. El begadim beinanim noim. Just nice, regular, average clothes is the proper way to do so. So he said you put on the right because the Torah says that the right is chashivas. However, we tie the left. There's chashivas on the left. When it comes to the tefillin, we tie a typical person's a righty, so he ties his left. Fine. The Iter Yad, the Mishnah says, what if you're a lefty? Shemit minich tefillin liyamin, that you put the tefillin on your right hand, shel kol adam, so al kol adam yaktim yamin gam lakshira. So he says, then in that case, you should actually you should tie the right first. Because for you, because you tie with your left hand, you tie your right arm, the tefillin's on your right arm, so therefore it should be yaktim yamin gam lakshira. So a what this is saying, if you're a lefty, you put on the right shoe and then you tie the left shoe. That's it. So you show the chashivas on the right, but still for you there's a chashivas of tying. Fine. However, on the opposite, fine. And it says when you wash your hands, also yamin tchila, the right comes first. Kol gufo, if you anoint your whole body, rosh tchila, your head comes first. Let's say person does shampoo. You first shampoo your hair before you apply soap on your body. Because it's like the king of all the limbs. In other words, a person needs to realize and think that this is the most important part of my body, my brain, my head. And therefore, we show its chashivas in that regard, in that way. Okay. Fine. So this addresses some of the questions. So let's move on over here to how Dirshu says. Due to the importance of the right side, a person should always dress his right side first. One should also wash his right side before his left, though one's head should be washed before anything else, as we just saw in the Mishnah Berurah. Despite the general prioritizing of the right side, when it comes to tying laces, the left shoe should be tied first, before the right shoe. Since the tefillin are tightened on the left hand, the tying of shoes should begin with the left shoe. A lefty who lays tefillin on his right hand should tie his right shoe first. When removing one's shoes, the left shoe should be taken off first, since less important, unless one is removing the shoes for a mitzvah. For example, Kohen taking off his shoes to duchen, which is discussed elsewhere. Okay. And then the last question is, can one remove two articles of clothing at the same time? So one of the things that's said over here in the Biurim Musafim, he says, V'livshit shnei malbushim yachad, regarding taking off two garments at the same time. So he quotes Rav Kanievsky, and then he quotes Rav Shimon Auerbach, says, Shinu hachmer b'devarim elu el b'mash nizker b'ferish. The only things we have to be careful about are things that are explicitly mentioned. However, anything else, as far as what's kosher l'shicha, we don't have to start imagining other things beyond that. Number 8, he says, V'halavushim b'yachid koiva im kippah. Let's say you take off, you have a hat and you have a kippah, so you take them both, comes down, they're stuck together. So on this, again, Rav Pelagio, the Ruach Chaim, says, Ki gam ze gorim l'shicha. This also causes shicha. He's skipping down just a drop. He says, "Well, gabi nashim tim srichos lehizar b'chol zeh." The women have to be careful with all these dinim. So inyan achilas leiv shel behem of oaf. When it comes to eating, let's say the heart of an animal, which shirak sachar nohagim shel oichlo. So only men are noig not to eat it. Mishum shachilas kosher l'shicha, because eating it is kosher l'shicha. So too he quotes the Beis Lechem Yehuda shenashim mu'ubaros, women who are pregnant, it's interesting. So he says, for a woman who's pregnant, maybe she shouldn't eat it, maybe because she's may have a boy in utero. Okay, let's conclude by looking at these last words of what Dirshu wrote. Certain actions can cause a person to forget his Torah learning. One of these is sleeping with clothing beneath one's head. If there is something separating the head and clothing, this may not be an issue, which is what we saw already. Putting on two articles of clothing at once, a coat and a shirt inside it, is another action in this category. The poskim disagree about whether removing two articles of clothing is the same at the same time can cause forgetfulness. Reading the writing on a tombstone can cause forgetfulness as well. The poskim disagree about whether a person transgresses the Torah prohibition against forgetting one's learning if he does one of these actions. A young child and a pregnant woman should also be careful in these matters so that the child or fetus will not develop a nature of forgetfulness. Ad kan.